Quick ask. Subscribe now, then let's jump in with the numbers. You don't need a headline to know your suburb feels thinner. You feel it on a Saturday when you pull out of the driveway, past minivans, cul-de-sacs, strip malls, and Target parking lots. But the energy is off. The open house balloons are fewer, the cars outside are spaced out instead of stacked, and the agent inside looks like they've had the same lukewarm coffee for hours. Streets that used to buzz with moving trucks and landscapers now have more empty driveways and blinds that stay half-closed all weekend. It's not dramatic, it's just thinner. Maybe you're outside Dallas or Atlanta, maybe Phoenix, Chicago, or a smaller metro nobody talks about on TV. The pattern still feels familiar. Signs that used to say "new listing" and vanish in days now carry price-reduced riders for weeks. Neighbors who once bragged about getting 10 offers in a weekend are quiet, or they're telling you how buyers keep backing out over financing issues. You're not being negative. You're noticing a rhythm that changed. What you're feeling is an early version of something headlines don't have language for yet. Not a dramatic crash, not a movie ghost town, but suburbs drifting in a phase where houses sit, streets quiet down, and sellers need buyers more than buyers need that zip code right now. In this video, we're going to unpack patterns that separate normal cooling from real ghost town risk so you can see your own suburb truly clearly before everyone else catches up. Let's rewind to 2020. The pandemic hits, and suddenly the suburbs aren't just a place to live. They become the country's safety valve. In cities like Phoenix, Dallas, and beyond, it's as if the door to the American dream swung wide open. Remote workers who had been shackled to sky-high city rents found relief. They traded tiny apartments for sprawling suburban homes, the kind with extra bedrooms, big backyards, and space to breathe. Families, tired of crowded city schools, began chasing better schools in places that promised room to grow, while investors flooded build-to-rent cul-de-sacs, hoping to cash in on a wave of buyers they didn't think would stop coming. Boomers who had spent years waiting to downsize suddenly locked in single-story, forever homes in communities where the lawns were bigger and the peace was quieter. Cheap money made it all feel possible. Stimulus checks flowed, stock market gains felt like free money, and mortgage rates hovered near historic lows. Stretching for bigger houses in far-flung exurbs didn't feel risky. It felt like opportunity. It was the perfect storm for growth. The Sun Belt exploded with activity. Outer Phoenix, the exurbs of Dallas-Fort Worth, sprawling Florida master plan communities, and Midwestern commuter rings all became symbols of the dream. You could drive 30 minutes further out, grab a bigger house for the same price, and feel like you were winning. But then the storm broke, the rates climbed, and the math that was always quietly in the background suddenly screamed louder than ever. Interest rates spiked, and suddenly that 3% mortgage was gone, replaced by 7%. Property taxes adjusted to reflect the peak values of the last few years. Utility bills ballooned as energy costs soared, and HOA dues crept up without warning. The same houses, the same backyards, now came with a monthly that didn't align with wages or rent demand. That same suburban home in the outskirts of Phoenix or a quiet Midwestern suburb suddenly felt like a weight, not just because of its price tag, but because of everything else that came with it. Commutes became longer and more expensive. Childcare costs consumed more of the paycheck, and utilities climbed as families braced for what felt like an endless cycle of rising expenses. The truth is, we didn't just build too many houses, we built too many stories. We let the dream of bigger homes in quieter places cloud the economic reality that was always lurking. Those suburban stories were built on assumptions, on cheap money, on forever promises, and on the belief that prices would keep climbing. But what happens when the environment changes? What happens when the math catches up? Now we're seeing the aftermath. It's no longer just about the number of houses built. It's about how the stories we told ourselves about these places, about the affordability, the security, and the safe investment, are unraveling in front of us. If you bought into that story without considering the economics that were always at play, now you're left with a payment that feels suffocating and a future that's uncertain. And here's the real question. Do you want to be the last one buying into that old story? Or do you want to look at the facts and make a smarter move? The choice is yours. When we talk about housing ghost towns, it's not about boarded up windows or abandoned streets. It's a slower, quieter shift, one that builds over time as the numbers no longer add up for families or investors. Think about it this way. Days on market go from a few days to weeks or even months. Listings that used to disappear almost overnight now linger, their price tags quietly slashed with every passing week. Homes are sitting longer, waiting for offers that don't come, sometimes waiting for 45, 60, even 90 days or more. In some cases, houses that would have sparked bidding wars just a couple of years ago are now getting offers that fall below asking price. The market isn't crashing all at once. It's deflating, one price cut at a time. You start seeing more price-reduced signs popping up, sometimes multiple times on the same house. Even new developments, those shiny new builds in the outskirts of town, aren't immune. While billboards around town boast about Phase 3 coming soon, the earlier phases are still waiting for buyers to fill them. Builders are offering concessions just to keep the sales alive. Renters are starting to get rental concessions as well, more than they would have ever expected just a few years ago. Investor-owned homes sit vacant, waiting for tenants who aren't showing up as promised. Deals are falling apart after inspections or financing. Things that used to be mere formalities are now deal breakers. So what's really going on here? When houses stop moving and sales slow to a crawl, it ripples out into the community. Empty houses don't just sit there, they affect the entire ecosystem. Schools lose students, local businesses lose customers, and even community institutions like churches see fewer people showing up for services. That school around the corner, the one that used to be buzzing with kids during recess, now feels quieter. The playground that once echoed with laughter now stands still. Local shops? They're getting less foot traffic, and you start to notice a few more for sale signs than you'd expect. These are the signs of a slow, creeping hollowing out. Ghost towns don't begin with the sudden closure of a business or the boarded windows of a decaying neighborhood. They start with the numbers. When the math stops making sense for the families who once called these places home, and for the small investors who helped fuel the boom, that's when the change starts. When the rent is too high, the mortgage too steep, and the job market too tight, that's when people start leaving or simply stop buying. And that's when the story of a housing ghost town begins to unfold. Here's a simple checklist you can apply to your own suburb to spot the early signs. Are days on market getting longer? Are homes sitting vacant for extended periods? Are price cuts happening more frequently? Are investors pulling back, leaving properties empty between tenants? Is there a growing number of listings that fall back on market after inspection or financing? If you're noticing these patterns, it's time to pay attention. These are the early signals that a suburb could be heading toward ghost town status. And remember, we're just getting started. Every suburb we explore from here on out will be measured against this checklist, helping you recognize the subtle shifts that are happening right under your nose. So, stay tuned as we dive deeper into how these trends are unfolding across the country and what it means for you. Let's start with the first wave of what I'm calling Tier 3 suburbs. These are places where the pulse of the market is still there, but the beat is quieter. These suburbs aren't collapsing, but their appeal is definitely fading. And if you look closely, the writing's on the wall. Think about those far-ring commuter towns on the outskirts of major metros, places that used to feel like affordable, convenient alternatives to city living. You know the ones, the areas with one main highway into the city, where a 45-minute drive could get you to the office in the morning, and where you'd tell yourself, it's worth it for the space. There's room for the kids, the dog, and a backyard. And in the boom years, that felt like a solid deal. But now you start to notice that same drive feels longer. What once seemed like a quick commute starts to feel like a small sacrifice every day, and that sacrifice is no longer easy to justify. The gas bills climb, the wear and tear on the car adds up, and time, precious time, is being spent behind the wheel instead of at home. You also notice it in the space you bought. Huge homes, but with high utility bills, rising insurance, and the reality that maybe all that square footage isn't as efficient as you thought. The empty rooms aren't a bonus anymore. They're a cost. These homes aren't just large, they're inefficient, draining resources, and that's harder to ignore in 2025. You can see this shift in small metro suburbs too, places that relied heavily on a single employer. Maybe it was a factory, a plant, or a big logistics hub. These were places where buyers flocked because the jobs were steady, the housing was affordable, and it felt like a safe bet. But as the economic landscape changes, so does the certainty that people once felt. Maybe that plant laid off workers, or maybe the logistics center got automated. Whatever the reason, what was once a stable pillar now feels like a gamble, and the housing market is feeling it. These places aren't completely dead, but you start noticing the subtle signs. Homes sitting on the market longer, speculative new builds that sit dark at night, entire blocks of for sale or for rent signs, and locals discussing price cuts on Facebook groups, venting about crime or businesses closing. In the Sun Belt, where everything seemed to move at lightning speed, the inventory stacks up quietly now. A few years ago, it was all about the space, the sun, the pool in the backyard, the no-income tax perk. People moved into these suburbs thinking, this is it, my dream home at a price I can actually afford. But in 2025, the inventory's piling up because what felt like a dream home now feels like a burden. It's bigger than you need, and the costs are higher than expected. You see the telltale signs: empty strip malls with fading signs that never fully leased up, new subdivisions with half-built homes standing in silence. And here's the kicker: this isn't the end. These suburbs aren't crumbling overnight, but they're losing the one thing that made them desirable: the perception that they were the next best thing. For a while, they were the smart choice, but now it's different. Buyers have stopped rushing in, and instead they're starting to choose more carefully. This isn't a disaster. It's slow-motion disengagement, and it's happening across these Tier 3 suburbs at a pace that's hard to ignore. As we look ahead, these areas will feel the shift more deeply, and the pressure will only build. But don't get me wrong, this is the mild end of the spectrum. What's coming next will make these changes look subtle in comparison. Let's shift gears to the Tier 2 suburbs, the ones that were once the dream. These were the areas that everyone thought were bulletproof. Think about those name-brand school districts, the ones with top-tier ratings, the ones where every family wanted to send their kids. Add in regional medical and educational hubs, or those coastal-adjacent belts that offered the perfect blend of lifestyle and convenience. These places weren't just desirable, they were the gold standard, suburban living at its finest. Great schools, safe streets, a strong sense of community, and a commute that didn't drain your soul. In those golden years, bidding wars were as common as backyard barbecues. 20 offers in a weekend was normal. Waived inspections? Of course. Appraisal gaps? It was practically a given. Buyers were fighting for a chance to move into these neighborhoods, assuming the price would always keep climbing. It wasn't just about getting a house, it was about getting into the right ZIP code. Everyone thought that if they just made it to these suburbs, they'd be set for the long haul. But now in 2025, the story has completely shifted. Instead of homes flying off the market in a weekend, now you're seeing listings sit for several weekends, weeks even. Price reductions, once a rare event in these areas, have become routine. Sellers are now offering buy-downs and closing cost help right in the listing remarks, things that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The script has flipped. The brand, the schools, the parks, the great sense of community still sells, but the reality of the monthly payment has become harder to ignore. The all-in cost, the PITI, HOA fees, utilities, daycare, commute costs, car payments, has quietly risen beyond what even solid dual-income families are willing to carry. Now, families are rethinking things. They're no longer locked into the this suburb or nothing mindset. Instead, they're cross-shopping, considering renting longer, moving one state over, or even downsizing the dream. A family in a Tier 2 suburb today is asking themselves, is this really worth it? The neighborhood may look great on paper, but is it sustainable in today's economy? And for many, the answer is no. These Tier 2 suburbs, once the bedrock of suburban life, are now the real shock. Because these were the places that believed they were immune to market fluctuations. They were the ones that thought, we've made it, we're safe. But in 2025, the math doesn't lie, and those once untouchable suburbs are feeling the sting of reality. The slow shift in these areas should be a wake-up call to everyone who's been chasing the same suburban dream, the dream that's no longer sustainable for many. And believe me, this is just the beginning. There's still one more level to go, suburbs where the slow hollowing out will define the next few years. But for now, these Tier 2 areas are where the real story is happening. And if you're living in one of these suburbs, the question isn't whether the market is cooling, it's whether you can afford the full cost of that dream anymore. Let's zoom in on the flagship suburbs, the ones that for years were the gold standard. These are the places where everything looks perfect on the surface. Beautiful homes, luxury strip malls, top-tier schools, and family-friendly neighborhoods packed with amenities. The kind of places that felt like a safe bet for families, retirees, and investors alike. These suburbs have always been the ones to bet on. Yet in 2025, even the most prestigious of these areas are showing signs of strain. The driveways still have nice cars parked in them, but now there's a growing number of for sale signs that refuse to budge. There are new playgrounds, but the swings sit empty, and the slides stay still as fewer kids show up to play. You might pass by stunning new constructions, but those homes are sitting unlived in, untouched by the families who once would have snapped them up in a heartbeat. Local restaurants, once buzzing with activity, now close earlier in the evening. Their once vibrant parking lots a shadow of their former selves. And here's the kicker. These flagship suburbs don't look abandoned. They feel hollow. Sellers are whispering about needing to move this place. Agents are quietly acknowledging that the heady days of 2021 pricing are long gone, and investors are realizing that rents just don't justify the acquisition costs anymore. You can almost hear the collective sigh of these neighborhoods. It's not the end, but it's definitely a shift. When even these high-status suburbs begin to wobble, it sends shockwaves throughout the entire region. The belief that these places were automatically safe starts to crack. When these trophy suburbs struggle, they change the entire way we think about suburban life. They accelerate the shift from, this is just a temporary blip, to we misprice suburban living. Imagine how this trend could reshape entire metros in just 3 more years. It's not about doom, but about the realization that something fundamental has changed. And we're only just starting to feel the ripple effect. If you're buying, renting, or investing in 2025's shifting suburbs, the first thing to remember is this: don't rush. If a listing has been sitting for 30, 45, or even 60+ days, treat that asking price as just the starting point. It's not set in stone. If you're serious about a property, never waive inspections lightly. Use what the inspection uncovers as your negotiating tool. Ask for repairs, or better yet, secure a permanent rate buy-down. Closing cost help should be a standard ask in softer pockets. It's not a favor, it's part of the process. And the key to making sure your purchase is sound? Always run a 5-year monthly comparison. That means adding up mortgage, taxes, insurance, HOA, utilities, and likely repairs, and comparing that total to current rent for something similar. If the numbers don't work, don't force it. For sellers, the rules have changed too. Forget pricing based on those 2021 bragging posts. Price based on what's actually closing right now. Get a pre-inspection so there are no surprises. Make your property stand out by leading with an actual incentive package. A rate buy-down, honest closing cost help, and a clear repair strategy. Trying to sell based on past prices in these ghost risk suburbs is just setting yourself up for disappointment. Buyers are smarter now, and overpricing will only teach them to ignore your listing. For investors, this is where things get real. The days of banking on skyrocketing appreciation are over. Safe now means properties that cash flow, even if appreciation flatlines. Look for areas with job resilience and avoid speculative markets. If a property can support itself on conservative assumptions, it's a solid buy. Zooming out, U.S. suburbia isn't dead. It's being repriced after years of easy money and unsustainable expectations. Things are changing, and that change presents opportunity, if you know how to navigate it. Drop your city and zip in the comments. Share your own observations about what you're seeing on the ground. Hit subscribe, because in the next episode, we'll map out which ghost belts are likely to bounce back first with our suburban comeback map. Stick with us as we navigate the cycle with intelligence and a steady hand.